Okay, got a few minutes, so we're going to do a little diagnosis on this ignition system. So we're going to hook the battery back up. And we're not going to use any of our jumpers, and see just where the power is terminating and what's live, if anything. Because there should be two modes of power back here. One is with the ignition on, in the on position. We should get power to the coil. And the other one is with the ignition in the start position, because then we should get power to this relay. Okay, we got power at the starter. And I believe I found the right keys. I really don't expect anything up front here to work. Chrysler made good vehicles in the 60s, but they kind of made their electrical systems pretty flimsy. It's just bare bones. Just enough to make it work. Real basic. There we go. Okay. Nothing in the on position. Whoa. That surprised me. Didn't do it the first time, but that might have just been lack of use. But plus the age of the vehicle, and with the windshield the way it is, I'm sure this dash got a lot of moisture in it, so probably every contact in there is bad. I really don't care. All I want it to be able to do is to start and run from the ignition. The next owner can have the pleasure of figuring out all the electrical gremlins. Just for fun, we'll see if anything works. Nothing on the heater fan. I'm not even sure where the fuse box is on this thing. Okay. I think I already checked the lights. Turn signal. Whoa. We got an active green light. Don't know if anything outside works. No activity on the right side. Let's see, this original horn button, it's just frozen. They installed this, which just came apart in my hand. Wow. Crispy crittered. So it looks like we have left turn signal. The alternator gauge is actually flickering with the light, so I guess the amp gauge does still work. The oil is just a light, an idiot light. Very typical of 60s Mopars. Let's see if anything outside's working. Wow. We have a turn signal. Oh, you want to talk about sketchy? Look at this hitch. I mean, what is that? 1/8 inch, if that? I mean, that's definitely homemade. They just tacked it on to the factory bumper. Yeah, there's no back support either. It's just scabbed onto the bumper. I can flex it with my thumb. Some people. I guess they figure it's not their life they're putting at risk because whatever they're towing is behind them. I'm actually surprised. I didn't think any of these lights would work. Nothing back there. What do you know? The front right one's working. Okay, turn that off. Tail lights. No tail lights. No headlight. No headlight. The main lights are dead. There's the flasher. Yeah, there's the fuse box. Yeah. Think that could be why stuff doesn't work? Looks like it leaked right on that corner. Flasher still looks new. I think that's a horn relay there. Hey, look, somebody left the air conditioning on. Voltage regulator. Sears. Did they use masking tape on that? Is that actually masking tape? It is. The ignition wires are all taped up with masking tape. Okay. Yeah, we didn't try the wipers yet. Yeah, no wipers. This thing will definitely need the electrical system gone through. But back to our original issue. So we actually have cranking power, and that really does surprise me. I didn't remember that working. So that means we're getting power to the relay like we should be. And we're even getting power to the ballast resistor like we should be. And it is dimming going through it. I don't know what that is. It's nothing. It's tied into that, and it goes nowhere. I'm trying to remember how this system works, because it does look like it's wired wrong, and that might be the issue. You got 12 volts coming from the ignition source, goes into the ballast resistor, through the ballast resistor, and then to the coil from here. But as I recall, there should be a secondary wire on here that's fed power while the ignition is being turned on, while it's in the start position, because they're feeding straight 12 volts to it until it starts, and then it goes on to this leg here. However, it's not just as simple as putting a feed from here to the start side of the relay, because then you'd be back feeding when it was running. You'd be getting that lower voltage right there fed right back into the relay. So there must be a secondary feed to the top of that from the ignition switch, and we just saw how that ignition switch looked. So I'm gonna have to refresh my memory on that. It's been a very long time since I've worked on these ballast systems, and this one's clearly hacked. However, some of it has come back alive. I mean, it's cranking over, and we are getting power back here. That doesn't even look like the right wire. It's incredibly thin, but it is going to the harness. It's definitely not a factory crimp. I also want to say that another reason why they do that is because when you're cranking on it, you lose the feed here. In fact, we can check that out right now. Put that in there. And no, we're not. It's draining it, but it's not losing it. Yeah, I'm going to do some research on that. On these point style systems, you don't want to leave the key in the run position too long when the engine's not running. The coil charges up and overheats, and it'll burn up or blow up the coil. This is the accelerator plunger right here. So when you work the accelerator, it's a little pump. And on these Carters, it looks exactly like a little plunger, like a little sink plunger. And that's what it does. Plungers fuel right down into the throat there. I just went through a bunch of my rebuild kits looking for a new plunger to put on there, and I have a couple of used ones that may suffice, and I'll probably interject some of that footage in here so you can see what I'm talking about. I will be able to take the top of the carburetor off right here in frame, so I don't have to remove the carburetor. Just switch that out and put it back together, as long as it is just the accelerator plunger and not the circuit itself that's plugged up. But I bet that's just dry. It's pretty common. Okay, let me reposition. Okay, I do have the ignition back in the run position briefly, so I'm going to check a couple things. One, this is the oil pressure sending unit wire. I should be able to ground that out if I can find a clean spot. And if it's working, the oil light will turn on. It's on that little square on the far right. I'm not seeing anything. But that's how you can test these early simple systems. it works on the ground, varying the ground for the completing the circuit, and you can do it with the oil pressure switch, temperature gauge, fuel gauge. Just disconnect the wire, put it to a ground. And we're not getting anything, but that doesn't surprise us. We saw how bad the wiring is up there. Up front here, they put a wing nut on it. So that's the same deal. This is the sensor for the and the whole thing's spinning, so I won't mess with that. But that's for the coolant gauge. So if you ground that out, the gauge should climb, which I don't expect it to. But I'll try testing them again a little more thoroughly when I have a jumper wire for this stuff. So I know what they did here. It's funny they found such a small bolt. I mean, I don't know my numbered bolts that well, but I'd say that looks like a 4. But when you buy these relays, this is a starter relay. They have two kinds. They have one for a manual transmission and one for an automatic transmission. The automatic transmission has the safety switch on it, so this leg here goes down to the transmission. So when you're not in park or neutral, it won't start. And again, just like the gauges and lights, all it's looking for is a ground signal. Now, the manual transmission one, Now the manual transmission one, which this is not, cost more because there's a little more labor involved. Not much, but if you look at the manual ones, this leg is folded over and soldered to the body, so it just has a always ground, so the relay will always work. So these are cheaper, and what people do, and I've done it myself, is you install this in your manual and then you just run a ground to this leg. They just did a really sloppy job of it, but I've just run a spade from that right down to the mounting ground and you're good to go. So I can clean that up and make that look nice. What I'm really questioning though is this. See, this is the wire coming out of the ballast resistor and it goes down to the coil. And this is the one we were having problems with the other day when we kept losing our spark. That is a really thin wire for carrying current to a coil. But if you look at this, it's a factory wire. It's going into the loom. That's just the plastic piece off of this connector. And it's the only wire going into the loom, so it looks factory. But even the oil pressure wire is like twice as thick, if not more. And that's not a loaded circuit. It's just looking for a ground. Same thing with the temp gauge. So why in hell would they run such a small wire to power the coil? Something definitely doesn't seem right about this. I wonder if the whole harness could be installed incorrectly, but I would still have to figure out what that was supposed to do and what is supposed to be there. So yeah, I got my research cut out for me. I don't even, this whole mount looks hacked in there. I don't know what was here factory. But I guess all in all, it's not as bad as I originally thought. I mean, it'll turn over now, and we are getting power to and from that. Stuff just needs to be cleaned up and done properly. And I'll look into that dual wire circuit, because I'm pretty sure one of these legs on this ballast resistor is supposed to have 2 wires on it. Tunes, anyone? Solid state AM radio. Something tells me that doesn't work. It probably needs more than capacitors. So another thing I'm looking at is the master cylinder. I showed it to you before from up top. That's where you get the fluid into it. But down here is how you work on it. And there it is. So that's where the rod goes into the master cylinder. Right there. And I can't tell what size that is, so I think it's going to have to come out if I want to bother with brakes. I'm not even sure I want to mess with it. But the pedal was actually stuck. That was actually rusted in there when I started working on this again. And I whacked on it, got it to break loose. And so you know there's all kinds of rust and crap in there. Filled it up full of fluid and pumped it, and doggone it if I didn't get brakes. It promptly all leaked out of the hole there, so the seals are gone. And I'm sure the bore is just a big rusted pit. But I was really surprised I got brake out of that thing. But I may just leave that for the next owner, because they're really going to have to go through the entire brake system on this thing anyway. That's not something you want to hodgepodge together, because being a 1960s system, it's a single pot master cylinder, so you want your brakes to be in good shape. Okay, what we're looking at now is my Valiant. It's a 63 slant 6 also. So the systems are pretty much identical. I did forget this though. I knew there was 2 wires to one side of the ballast. I didn't remember it was on both sides. I forget what that's about. Yeah, I got some research cut out for me. I gotta see it. I can look at the wiring diagram for this car. I have the factory service manual for this one, and I can refresh myself on what those do. It's like I said, there is a bypass system involved. I do remember that. Just how it works, I don't remember. It's not on an extra relay, because the only relays in these vehicles is the start relay and the horn relay, and that's it. Like I said, they kept it real basic. So it's got to have something to do with the ignition switch. But then I'm going to have to try to find if the van is supposed to be wired like this, which I would assume so. But I didn't see any dangling wires down there except for that one hacked on add-on. So I'll have to look at that. But yeah, see, this is what I was talking about. I even replaced this relay not too long ago. That's why it's still kind of clean. So it's marked G for ground. Just ran a wire from it to the mounting bolt, because you can buy the manual. Like I said, that tab there is just folded over and soldered onto the body, and they charge you a fair amount more for that. I mean, either way, it's not high dollar. Like this was probably $15, and maybe they charged, $22 or something. I don't remember, but either way, it's not real expensive. But it was so easy to run a ground wire. I just did that. So that's where we are for now. I'm going to wrap this one up But in the meantime, I'm going to do some research, and I'll let you know what I find. Thanks for watching. That's General Motors, Rochester. I suppose I should have marked these. Okay, that's a Carter. Oh, there's a accelerator pump, but it looks like hell. That's Ford. Yeah, Ford. Only one Carter so far. Wow, I don't even recognize that one. Aha! Get the mother load. Blue Streak. If you can find this stuff, it's the best. You won't find it in its raw form like this unless it's new old stock like this piece is. But it was made by Stant. I think Napa bought them out. But you can feel and see the quality in this. It feels sturdy, it's thick, it's got the brass inserts. And they last forever. Back when tune-ups were a thing, we would do a tune-up with Blue Streak parts and we knew we wouldn't have to touch it for years. Boat impeller. Okay, that's a Carter. We got two accelerator plungers. That one don't look great. This one. It don't look great either, but it may be better than what's in there. Of course, nowadays people buy a car and they just don't tune it up at all. Tune-ups last so long. And of course, today all it really is plugs in the conventional sense. That doesn't look good. And plugs last 100,000 now instead of 30,000. And that's a good thing. Looks like I got quite an accumulation of old dried up stuff. Mopar spark plugs. Oh wow. Yeah, that looks like a quadrajet. That kit's probably close to 30 years old. I think it's been that long since I've worked on a quadrajet. That one looks vaguely familiar. Oh, I think that's yeah, it's a 2-barrel Rochester. Yeah. All this stuff is pretty old. I don't do this kind of thing much anymore. Holly 1940. I think that is a slant 6 carburetor. But we are after Carter's. Ow. No clue on that one. Another Ford Motorcraft carburetor. Hold on a second. Digging around here in this dark corner, I just found a Holly 1920. Yeah, and that would fit that van. That is the correct linkage for it. Looks pretty clean. I'd much rather resurrect that Carter though. It's blasphemy in the auto world, but I'll say it anyway. I don't like Holly carburetors. They've given me nothing but problems. Okay, last two kits here. Okay, this one's Carter. Still got some new gaskets in that one. Looks like it got wet though. Yeah, it's not all that great either. Okay, last one. I recognize this one. Sadly, this is a Holly 2-barrel off of an international pickup I had a long time ago. It's funny, I thought I had an unopened Carter kit somewhere. Either I've got it somewhere else and I don't remember, or I'm just remembering wrong. These two here, not great, but I'll soak them in gas and see if they soften back up. If they do, they may be better than what's in there.